Ms. Lee.
Thank you, Chair. We are ready to hear from our next witness. Please may she be sworn in. Thank you.
Please could I ask you to affirm?
I, Linda Costa, do solemnly, sincerely and truly declare and affirm that the evidence I shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
Thank you very much.
Please can you state your full name for the record?
My Linda Mary Costard.
Thank you. You are the daughter of Geoffrey George Toms, who was born on the 11th of May 1927 and died on the 14th of May 2015 at the age of 88. Is that right?
Yes, that is.
You'd like me to refer to your father as Jeff throughout my questions,
Yes,
is that
please.
right? And you'd like me to call you Linda?
Yes.
Thank you, Linda. By way of background, the inquiry sent you a written Rule 9 request for evidence on the 8th of April, and you attended an evidence session with the inquiry team on the 10th of April. Following that evidence session, the inquiry prepared a witness statement for you. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah, that's correct.
You have a copy of that witness statement in the bundle in front of you.
Yeah.
It is 15 pages long and it's dated the 20th of May this year.
Yep.
If you could please turn to the last page of that statement, page 15. We see there a statement of truth and then you have signed the witness statement. Have you had the opportunity to read through that document recently?
Yes, I have.
I believe there's one correction that you would like to make.
Yes.
If we just turn to that together, please. Paragraph 9 on page 3.
Yes.
You state there that the event leading to Jeff's admission was that your mother found him trying to put a pillow on his face. In fact, he had asked your mother to put a pillow on
Yes.
his face, is that right?
Yes, that is right. He asked Mum to hold the pillow over his face, yes.
Save for that correction, is your witness statement true and accurate to the best of your
Yes,
knowledge and belief?
it is to the best of my knowledge.
As you know, Linda, that witness statement will therefore stand as your evidence to the inquiry. I won't go through it line by line with you today or ask you to read it out,
Yeah.
but I will be asking you some questions about it.
Okay.
Please be assured that the Chair and the inquiry team have read through the entirety of that statement very carefully, and it will form part of the body of evidence upon which the inquiry relies.
Okay.
I would also like to acknowledge that you provided a commemorative and impact account in relation to Jeff, and that was read by counsel to the inquiry, Rachel Troop, during the November hearing last year.
Yeah.
The inquiry is extremely grateful to you for providing that evidence and your oral evidence today.
Thank you.
I'd just like to remind you I won't be asking you to name any staff members today, so
No.
please try not to do so.
No, that's fine.
Your evidence will focus on your concerns in relation to Jeff's care and treatment under the care of SEPT. If at any point you require a break, please just flag that to me and we can
Okay.
pause. You state in your witness statement that the events therein come from both your recollection and also reading the root cause analysis investigation report provided to you by the Trust after Jeff's death.
Yes, because there was quite a few things that we weren't aware of until that report.
And what we'll do, we'll go through the timeline and key events together now, taken from your witness statement, and I'll ask you a few questions along the way. Then we'll turn to your other concerns and finally your recommendations.
Okay.
Please feel free to refer to the statement in front of you at any time, and I'll
Yep.
tell you where we are as we go along.
Okay, lovely, thank you.
As I understand it, according to your witness statement, Jeff started displaying some symptoms, becoming forgetful and confused, around the end of 2012 when he was 85 years old.
Yes,
Is that
that's right.
At that point, he had no history of mental health illness and hadn't had any contact with mental health services.
No, none whatsoever.
He was referred by his GP to the community mental health team for older people and was assessed on the 25th of October 2013.
Yeah.
Is that right? He attended outpatient appointments from November through to February 2015.
Yes.
The investigation report notes that your father was seen initially with a moderate depressive episode and that he had memory impairment, vascular in nature, since February 2014, but you would like to point out that actually it was earlier than that, as you say, it was 2012.
Yes, it was, yes.
You describe your mother battling for answers, and you believe she told you Jeff was finally diagnosed with vascular dementia around February 2015.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yeah, that was right.
You don't think any medication or treatment was prescribed at that stage, perhaps just phone numbers for support services, and your mother was told that people would be in touch about helping with Jeff's care, but she didn't hear anything.
No, that's all she was told. She wasn't really given any information to do with vascular dementia and that type of thing, but yeah.
On Friday the 1st of May 2015, Linda, I'm at paragraph 9 now, if you'd like to refer to it. The Alzheimer's Society called your mother to arrange for someone to come and see Jeff.
Yeah.
Your mother explained that he had asked her to put a pillow over his face and that he talked about wanting to die. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
On the 5th of May 2015, a nurse and a woman from Canvey Islands Dementia Services visited Jeff at home. After an assessment, a decision was then made to admit him to Rochford Hospital, and your mother was informed that was the only option to keep him safe.
Yes,
Is that
that's
right?
right.
That was the first time an inpatient admission had ever been mentioned.
Yes, it
Is that
was. It was the first time. It's the first time that anyone had actually come round to see him. So, yeah.
At paragraph 12, you tell us that Jeff was on beach ward for less than 6 days, from the 5th of May to the 11th of May 2015.
Yes.
And during that time, he sustained severe, somewhat unexplained injuries that ultimately led to his death.
Yes, that's right.
According to the Trust's investigation report, Linda, if you'd like to refer to the timeline, you've set it out at paragraph 29A on page 7.
Yep.
On Wednesday the 6th of May, the day after he was admitted, Jeff fell and was found on the floor of his bedroom at 11:30 p.m. in the evening.
Yes.
Is it right you and your mother weren't informed about that fall
No,
at
we
the time?
didn't know anything about that.
I know you state in your statement that somebody visited Jeff every day while
Yes.
he was on the ward. Can you recall if it was you or your mother who visited on Thursday the 7th of May?
We
after
all
that?
went on the Thursday the 7th because they said they just wanted to have a small meeting just to tell us what was happening, though all they really told us was that they'd taken his walking stick and the walker that he was used to away and given him this other walker.
I think you're referring there to a meeting with 2 nurses and the physio that we will
Yes.
come on to talk about in greater detail.
Yeah.
Thank you. And on the 7th of May, the Thursday, can you recall whether Jeff had any visible injuries at that stage?
No, he didn't. That we could see. Otherwise, we would have been very concerned.
Returning to paragraph 29, 29B, you recall that on Thursday evening, the 7th of May, Jeff fell and was found on the floor of his bedroom at 9:05 in the evening. Again, you weren't informed about that at the time, is that right?
No, that's right. We didn't know about that.
At some point on Thursday, the 7th of May, or early on Friday morning, the 8th of May, he fell and was found on the floor at 2:50 a.m. and referred to A&E. On Friday, the 8th of May, staff called your mother to tell her about that fall and that Jeff was in A&E. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah.
You say in your witness statement that you were aware of that at the time. Did your mother then telephone you to inform you what
Yes,
had
she
happened?
did, because they just rang her to say if you're coming down to visit, he's not here, he's in A&E, so...
Do you know what injuries Jeff had at that stage, so on Friday?
That was all around his wrist, because his wrist became red and just looked inflamed and a little bit swollen at the time. I'm not aware of that they gave him an X-ray or anything like that.
And was that after he returned from the A&E visit?
Yes.
When you then visited later that day?
Yes.
Returning to paragraph 29 and 29D,
Yeah.
on Saturday night, the 9th of May, at around 9:15 p.m, Jeff fell and was again referred to A&E, but on that occasion, a paramedic assessed him on the ward and decided he could stay there. And again, you weren't informed about that fall
No.
at the time, is that right?
No, not at all. And
On-
of course, they obviously had some concern because they'd asked for regular neurological observations.
Yes. Thank you. On Sunday, the 10th of May, you visited Jeff as it was his birthday the next day.
Yeah.
You found him slumped in a chair with his walking frame on the other side of the room, out of
Yeah.
his reach. His drink had been knocked on the floor,
Yeah.
and he was confused and incoherent.
Yes.
You described that he had a light brown fluid coming out of his nose, and it was clear that he had injuries to his face at that stage.
Yes.
Is that right? Can you recall what time of day you arrived that day on the Sunday?
I can't. It would probably have been early afternoon.
And do you know what sort of length of time you visited for? It may be that you can't recall. That's fine.
No, it would have been at least hour and a half, at least. Yeah.
Thank you. And when you arrived that day, did you know how he had sustained those injuries that you could visibly see?
As far as the fluid coming that was here, I did go and speak to the nurses, and they just said, oh, we've just given him some medicine, that's probably all that is. So, yeah, the other injuries, even though you could see his nose a bit crooked and that, it was hard because he was so incoherent. It was more focused on that side of things.
Yes.
And of course, the first thought was him, fluid under the nose, that something terrible had happened.
Yes.
But then they told me, no, it was just medicine. And even though part of you's like, is that really what it is? But then you couldn't get any answers from them.
Yeah. Thank you. According to the Trust's investigation report, when care was handed over to the night staff that night around 9 p.m. on the Sunday, Jeff was unresponsive,
Yes.
but they simply hoisted him into a wheelchair and returned him to his bed. It appears nobody checked on him or raised any concerns about why he hadn't moved all day. Again, that's something you found out since when reading
Yes.
that report, is that right?
Yes, it is. We found out that apparently in the morning, the Sunday morning, he was fighting. He didn't want to get out of bed and get dressed. So they just dressed him, put him in the hoist again, took him down to the day room, put him in the chair, and then just left him there. And of course, they obviously all went home without even bothering to take any note that he was there. The night staff ones there were quite horrified to go in there and check. I think it was about 10 o'clock and find him still slumped
Yes.
in a chair. Yeah.
Thank you. On Monday, the 11th of May, your mother and daughter went to visit Jeff, and at that stage his nose was quite visibly broken.
Yes.
He had 2 black eyes, bruising all over his face, and his wrist was pink and swollen. In fact, you describe him as looking like he'd been mugged. Is that right?
Yeah, really did.
Again, did any member of staff explain to your mother or daughter how he had sustained those injuries?
No, they just said they didn't know how it all happened. And when Mum said about he really does need to be seen by a doctor, all they could say was, it doesn't work like that. You can't just say you want a doctor. same as they told us previously, that they didn't deal with medical conditions.
And I'd like to touch on that in quite some detail shortly, but is the case that on the 11th he was only referred for physical treatment because that's something that your mother and daughter pushed for?
I think so, yes, or either that, where he deteriorated so badly that there was no way they could ignore it any longer, because by then he was, well, I don't know, he was out of his head. He was just screaming, shouting, throwing himself around, then he'd go really still. He just, yeah, it was horrible, really, really horrible.
Just returning to the chronology of things for a moment. So your mother and daughter arrived, saw his injuries. I think you state in your witness statement that at that point another patient actually informed them that they saw Jeff lose control of his walker in the corridor on the 9th of May.
Yes.
And that he fell forwards and hit his face on the crossbar of the walker. Is that right?
It went across, he said it went across the bridge of his nose.
Is that a detail that the staff ever informed you or your mother about?
No, they weren't. They just said they weren't aware of it.
Moving forwards in time then that day, we know that you and your daughter went to sit with Jeff in A&E as the nurse accompanying him was going off duty at 7 p.m. Is that right?
Yeah, Mum just got a phone call letting her know that he'd been taken down to Southend Hospital. He was supposed to be going on to the acute assessment ward, but they didn't have a bed, so he was going to be left in A&E, and one of us would have to go and sit with him because the nurse was just going to go off duty. I mean, she went off duty well before 7 o'clock, because when we got there, he was in a cubicle all on his own, because A&E said he wasn't their responsibility.
And is it right that around midnight you asked for help, and after 30 minutes a nurse eventually came and sat with Jeff so that you could go home for a little bit?
I mean, Dad was, he was really lashing out, and he didn't have a clue what was going on. And every now and again one would go to me, "Are you all right over there?" And I'd go, "No. Does it look like we are?" And this went on for quite a few hours. In the end, I just went over, this isn't right.
Who was saying, "Are you all right over there"? One of the staff or another?
One of the nurses on A&E who actually work at Southend Hospital. Yeah.
Thank you.
And just to be clear, that behaviour, the lashing out, the incoherence, you say in your statement that was completely unlike your father.
Yeah, he would have been mortified if he'd have known, because at one point he actually caught my daughter on the head. Oh, he would have been beside himself, but he wasn't in there anymore, really, as we now know.
So we know that Jeff was then transferred to end-of-life care on the 6th floor, and you went to visit him on the 12th of May, 2015. I'm now at paragraph 34 of your witness statement. A scan on the 13th of May showed a bilateral subdural hematoma and bleeding to the brain. In other words, he had a severe brain injury.
Yes.
Jeff also had a urinary tract infection and his wrist and nose were broken. That's right, isn't it? You state in your statement that he died around 6 a.m. on Thursday, the 14th of May, 2015. Is that right? I think in your witness statement you describe a somewhat stark contrast between the lack of care that you felt he received on Beach Ward and then the care that he received during end of life, and in particular after he passed away. The staff were caring in relation to allowing him to remain so that everybody could come and say their goodbyes.
Yeah, they were. I mean, the consultant met with us on the Tuesday that went to tell us what the findings were, and he wanted to do the scan just so that we would know exactly what had caused him to pass. and also to say to us, really, we needed to withdraw all treatment apart from things that keep him comfortable. And the nurses were so every time they came in to do something, they talked to him. Even though he wasn't aware of any of it, they were really lovely up there. Yeah.
Thank you. Linda, now that we've been through the timeline of Jeff's involvement with mental health services, I'd like to ask you some questions regarding other concerns that you raise in your witness statement. I'd like to go through thematically in the way that you do in your witness statement. Firstly, I'm going to ask you some questions about the ward environment when Jeff was on Beach Ward, albeit I appreciate he was only there for 6 days.
Yeah.
You state there wasn't anything in the day room for real comfort or interaction on the ward. In particular, you refer to a lack of a television. Would you like to say anything about other things that you would have expected to see?
Well, it just seems like that he was basically put in a chair and they would take his walker away from him so
Yes.
that he couldn't get up and move. So much so they even put him in nappies, which I expect you're going to cover later, even though he wasn't incontinent. There were some staff, but they'd either be stood in a corner chatting to each other or on their phones. So it was okay for the other patients that were mobile because they could get around and wander around. But for Dad, he was literally stuck there, and even if he wanted to eat or drink, he would have had to go up to the servery in that room.
Yes.
Bearing in mind he had vascular dementia, so he didn't know anymore when he needed to eat and drink.
Yes.
Yeah.
So put simply, once he was sat in that chair in the day room, there was absolutely nothing for him to be doing.
Nothing at all.
You also say in your witness statement that the alarm to call for attention in his room was behind the bed where he wouldn't be able to reach it.
Yeah, it was
Is that
literally
right?
where the headboard was. The alarm was there, which there's no way he would ever have been able to reach it.
And his room was behind 2 sets of fire doors.
Yes.
And then it was the nurse's office. So you had concerns about whether anyone would be able to get to him quickly if anything happened.
Yes, especially as the reason they'd taken him in there is because he didn't want to be around any longer. So with my experience from the prison service, the one thing you do when someone wants to commit suicide, you have constant watch on them.
Yes.
But no, there was nothing at all.
Is that something that you were able to raise at the time, or did you not feel able to raise it?
It was very hard to find someone to talk to because all they would go to is, oh, well, you need to talk to the doctor about that. And, oh, no, the doctor's not here. We can't just ask him to come along and talk to you.
Yes. You also raised concerns about the mattress next to Jeff's bed, given that he hadn't previously had falls, and in your view, it was a trip hazard. It made it more likely that he would fall.
And that's probably why he had all the falls in the bedroom, because it was a proper bed mattress on the floor. So we're talking about someone who's unsteady, well, not unsteady, but has vascular dementia, so wouldn't even remember it was there. And I think for any of us, if you wake up to then go and step out of bed and suddenly you're on this springy mattress, yeah.
Was that there immediately when he was admitted, can you recall?
I don't know, because I was away at the time and I only came back on the Wednesday, so I only saw it from the Thursday and it was there from then.
Thank you. And as far as you were aware, the purpose of that mattress was what? Was it if he fell out of bed, it was something
Yes.
soft to land on? Or?
Yes, that was the reasoning behind it, if he fell out of bed.
And was that something that staff said to you as an explanation as to why it was there?
Yes, yeah.
Sticking with risk of falls for the moment, you note in your witness statement that having read the investigation report, you now realise that when Jeff was admitted, he told staff that he was prone to falls.
Yes.
So I'd just like to talk about that a little bit if we
fine.
can. Firstly, that's incorrect, isn't it? You tell us in
Totally.
your statement that he didn't have a history of falls.
No, he didn't have falls.
Taking this in stages, when Jeff was admitted, firstly, was anybody with him? Do you recall?
My mum and my daughter took him in,
Yes.
but they were only asked to do the brief handover, like, here's his clothes, he had a lactose intolerance, a quite severe one, so Mum had taken all the bits and pieces of food, and Mum would have said about the hearing aids and the false teeth. That's all they were ever asked about, and then they left.
Yes.
So
in terms of any assessments that then took place, they weren't present for those assessments,
no,
is that right?
none at all. We were never present.
So, as far as you're aware, when he reported that he had a history of falls, there was nobody else there from the family to be able to correct that?
No, none of us were there.
Do you know if he had any sort of capacity assessment when he was admitted as to whether or not he had the capacity to be giving that history, or if family members needed to be consulted?
No, not aware of anything like that being done on him.
And so just to be absolutely clear, you first found out that he'd reported that history of falls when you read that investigation report?
Yeah.
Thank you.
When he went in, he used to walk with one of those three-wheeler ones.
Yes.
And he was like a little demon everywhere. But they told Mum she wasn't allowed to take it in for him because it would get lost. So he went in with his walking stick.
Yes.
And what they said apparently was that that was not good enough, so they gave him one of those cage type ones, which he'd never used before in his life, but all without any input from us or anything.
And I think it's right, isn't it, you say in your statement that he really wasn't comfortable using that walker without the wheels?
No. And I think it actually said he was supposed to have someone with him.
Yes.
Yeah, but you never saw anybody with him.
Turning, if we can, to your next concern, you've touched on it a little already, and that's in relation to whether or not Jeff's basic needs were met while he was on beach ward. You state in your witness statement that his hearing aid and his dentures were lost, with no attempt to replace them for 4 or 5 days, during which time he wouldn't be able to hear or eat properly. Firstly, do you know if a property form of any kind was completed when he was admitted?
I honestly don't know, but the way how blasé they were around it, I would say not, because they were just more like, oh, really? Oh, well.
And do you know when he lost those items?
No.
No.
It was only as he got worse, I think, that then we noticed that those weren't there. I mean, because it was such a short time, I think you always think that someone's going to have a couple of days settling in time while all the staff work out what's going to happen and everything else. And I suppose that's what we were waiting for.
Were they ever found and returned to him?
No, they weren't. Everything, his clothes and everything were all gone.
Were you ever provided an explanation as to what had happened to them, or
No,
where
they
anybody
just
thought
went,
they...
oh, he must have got lost when he was being moved or something, and that was it.
His dentures, did he wear them in the day and then not in the evenings?
Yes, he would take them out one evening. But
Was
yeah.
that the same with his hearing aid?
Yes, he would take his hearing aid off at night, yeah. But also as well, because of the vascular dementia, then you would have to often remind him that he needed to put them in and the hearing aids on, because he deteriorated so much in that way, hence why in the lucid moments he was so unhappy.
Thank you. You've told us a little already about the food that your mother took in for him because he had a dairy allergy and lactose intolerance. You explain in your statement that your mother was asked to put all of those things in the fridge.
Yeah.
After Jeff died, when she went to collect any
I went
items
to
that
collect
remained,
them, yeah.
they were all
Yeah.
still there.
They were. Everything, the biscuits, everything that she'd taken in were all still there in the packages.
Do you know whether he was ever offered any of that food?
No.
You don't know?
I don't
You
know. You never, whenever you went, there was never anything by the side of where they'd left him to even make you think he'd had some food. All you'd see is like one of them plastic cups of water, which 9 times would be knocked over or something, because he was at that stage. If you didn't say to him, like, Jeff, you need to eat now, and then you'd have to convince him he needs to eat, because in his mind he'd either just eaten or he didn't need to eat, and the same with the drink.
Did you ever expressly say to them, you need to encourage him to eat and help him to eat?
Yeah, Mum told them all of that.
Yeah.
But I'd say they was just, we don't deal with medical problems. That was their go-to answer.
Did you ever see him eat while you were there?
No,
Did your
never.
mother ever see him eat?
Not that I'm aware of.
Thank you.
And just following on from that point, you explained that actually, after a few days, you could see Jeff's pacemaker because, in your view, he was becoming so malnourished.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yeah.
You've already explained to us that he couldn't get to the serving hatch unassisted, and that often he had to be reminded to eat and drink. Was there ever a response to you raising that as a concern? You just said it was raised as a concern that he needed to eat and drink, and
No,
it's
they just
it's not a
they
medical
would just
problem.
go, well, he was probably offered. Or I think there's even one note somewhere where he drank a cup of tea.
Thank you. I'm going to ask you now about your concerns in relation to Jeff's observation levels on Beach Ward. You state that obviously because he was admitted with suicidal thoughts, they should have kept a close eye on him.
Yeah.
According to the investigation report, he should have been on level 2 observations, but you personally never saw anybody observe him, essentially.
And from where his room was located,
Yes.
it was not where you'd put someone that needed to be on observations.
Yes. Did you know at the time that he was on level 2 observations, or indeed what that
No.
meant?
No. I say no one actually spoke to us about any of it. So we was, because we were thinking, right, okay, he's in there. Not always good on a weekend anyway, because of everything going on. But come Monday, that's when we hoped everything was going to start then. Guess what? But on Monday it was too late.
Thank you. I'm just moving on to some further concerns in relation to staff. You say in your witness statement, and this follows a point you made earlier, that the whole ward seemed to run on little or no interaction with patients, and when you saw them, they were sitting in the office having a chat or on their phones. Can you just describe the office to us? Was it a glass box type office,
no.
or was it a room
They
with a door?
couldn't see the day room from the office. No, they wouldn't have been able to see it.
And was it an office with a normal door or a door with a window? Or
Yeah, just a normal door.
Normal door.
Yeah,
Were there any windows from the office through to the ward?
no.
No. So when you saw staff sitting in the office having a chat on their phones, was that when the door was opened then, presumably?
Yeah, but there would sometimes be, I don't know whether they were auxiliary staff, you'd find a couple of them were just stood in the day room having a chat or something like that, which was, I suppose, for the other patients that were mobile and able to have conversations and everything else, I suppose they could have gone up and spoken to him, but where, as far as Dad was concerned, it was literally, and it was in the same seat they put him, which was tucked over on the side, so he'd be put there, and his walker would be put over there, up against the wall, and that was where he would be left all day, as we now know.
Yes.
Yeah.
Just one further point on the mobile phones. Was staff in the office on their phones, or was staff on the ward also on their phones?
You'd see the staff on the ward. As far as the office went, because of course as soon as you came to the door, then they would turn around and look at you to see what you wanted. But yeah.
And do you mean physically on the phone, or do you mean what's the norm now, scrolling on social media?
Yeah.
Turning to the deliberate steps that you say staff took to keep Jeff immobile, and you say in your statement that you really do think that was to make their lives easier.
Yes.
You've touched on some of these already. Obviously, he was given a walking frame without wheels.
Yes.
He wasn't permitted to have his own walking frame, the reason given because it would get lost.
Yes.
When he was sitting in the day room, as you've just described, his walker was placed nowhere near him.
Yes.
They used a hoist to move him around.
Yeah, if he didn't want to go, then they would just put him in a hoist and physically take him down there and leave him.
And you state that he was in nappies even though he
Yes.
wasn't incontinent.
Yeah.
You've just touched on that. And in fact, sorry. Go.
Yeah,
Yes.
he was never incontinent. He was more than capable, as long as he gets walker, of course, go and take himself to the toilet.
Are you aware whether they did an incontinence assessment or
No.
not at all?
No.
You describe a specific incident where your mother and daughter were visiting and Jeff said he needed to use the bathroom. He was told, it's okay, you've got a nappy on.
Yeah.
And then they took him to his room, pulled the nappy aside, and the nurse was trying to collect the urine that way.
Yeah,
Is
what
that right?
happened was he would say he wanted to go to the toilet, really wanted to go to the toilet. So my daughter walked up to the nurse, or she was, and said, right, he really needs to go to the toilet. And they just went, he's got a nappy on, he doesn't need to. So I was fine because this is Dad being Dad. So he was back in the room, laying in bed, and he literally pulled his nappy off and then started weeing while a nurse was trying to catch it in a cup.
Thank you.
Yeah, but no, they flatly refused. He wasn't allowed access to the toilet because there was no need.
And just to be clear, when he was at home, he was using the bathroom at home?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, always.
Just further on staff, you state that after Jeff died, following the investigation, the trust recognised there were problems with staffing, that there weren't enough permanent staff, so people didn't know what was happening on the ward, and they said to you they won't let that happen again, but you didn't feel confident in that.
No.
Is that right?
No confidence whatsoever. They didn't even know what rooms anybody was in. There was no numbers on bedrooms, nothing. They didn't have a clue.
Would you like to say anything else about your concerns in relation to staff, in particular qualifications?
Yeah, I think it all comes back to this same retort they gave, that they're not there to deal with like health problems, but they didn't even deal in any way with his suicidal thoughts, which I know weren't there all the time because of the vascular dementia, but no concern. It was purely like it was a paper exercise. Take him there, they've done their bit, put him in a room, and that's it, job done. And make it as easy as possible on themselves, which someone like in Dad's position at that time, vascular dementia, there was nothing he could do about it.
Yeah.
because they'd taken away any means he had of looking after himself, which he was still capable of doing.
Yes.
He had to be reminded about different things and so much he forgot. But he, with Mum's prompting that, he could still go out there and do the washing up. Okay, the washing up was of no use, it'd have to be done again, but he'd go and do it.
Yeah.
And they just took everything away from him. They just totally, it was horrific, because my dad was a very proud, funny man. Yeah. So.
When you referred a moment ago to medical conditions and physical health concerns, are you referring to pre-existing conditions that Jeff had?
Yes.
And also to the injuries, obviously, that he sustained and that malnourishment that followed?
Yeah, at the time, it's more about the conditions he already had. I mean,
Yes.
he was on, because he had stents fitted and that, so bits on that. But it was like one of the staff even turned, one of the nurses, I think it was one of the head nurses, even turned round and went one day, don't even think he's got dementia. And that sort of said it all, really, because it was though, I think a lot of people with dementia can hold a conversation with someone, but it doesn't mean what they're talking about is right, because you don't know that person.
Yes.
And that's obviously what had been going on, and they just took it as carte blanche and took no notice over the fact that he had vascular dementia. And from what I understand, on that weekend in particular, none of the staff on that ward were anything whatsoever to do with that ward. So therefore that was their response as to why nothing had been done, because none of them were aware of anyone's requirements or what needed doing or anything else.
Yes.
Remind me, it was a specialised older people's ward, was it?
It was a specialised mental health ward.
But not necessarily for older people.
No,
Thank you.
no, not necessarily for older people.
Thank you.
When you referred to the fact that Jeff had stents fitted, so you were asking for him to essentially have his heart checked over, were you? And you were just told, well, no, we don't deal with that here, we're to do with mental health.
That and the vascular dementia side of things, they weren't there to deal with that.
You state in your witness statement that you don't believe Jeff received any rehabilitation or therapeutic care because you could visit when you like. There were no plans in place
No.
for him to have any sessions.
And he was always in that chair.
So as far as you're aware, there was no treatment of that nature
No.
during his 6-day admission. And you told us earlier that the only care plan you were aware of followed the discussion with the physio and the 2 nurses, and that was in terms of his mobility and what walking aids he might
Yes.
need. Is that right?
Yeah. That was the only assessments we were ever told about. But of course they did that by asking him the questions. And even when we went, well, he's not used to one of those, they were just like, okay, because someone will always be with him, which of course they weren't.
In your witness statement, you go on to say that you as a family weren't consulted about Jeff's care and treatment at
No.
all. Is that
None
right?
whatsoever.
In terms of the falls that Jeff had and what you were informed, as we've discussed at the outset of your evidence, you were only told about one fall by staff members, and that was
Yeah.
for a call to your mother.
Yeah.
Is that right? You found out about another fall from another patient,
Yes.
as we've heard. Those other 2 falls, the Wednesday and Thursday night, how did you come to learn of those? Was it through the serious incident report after he
through
died?
the report that there were so many things like what had happened Sunday night and everything. We found out all through their report that we asked them to carry out.
And is it right that you still remain unclear what injuries he sustained from which falls?
Yes. again, because it's such a short period of time, it's hard to say what happened when or how.
Yes. I'm going to ask you some questions now about the complaint that you made in relation to Jeff's care and treatment after his death.
Yeah.
You state, at paragraph 36, Linda, if you'd like to take a look at it. You state that around 3 months after Jeff died, someone from the Alzheimer's Society called your mother and she raised her concerns regarding Jeff's care, which prompted them to then recommend that she submit a complaint, and they explained how to do it.
Well,
Is that
what
right?
they actually rang for was to see if Mum needed them to come and visit Dad,
Right,
who had already, of course, passed
Yes.
away 3 months earlier.
yes.
So Mum explained all that to him, and then, she is the one that said about you need to submit a complaint.
And we can see from the investigation report that you and your mother submitted that complaint on the 24th of September 2015. You state in your witness statement you feel that complaint just wasn't taken seriously and that it got you nowhere. Would you like to say any more about that complaint in terms of why you feel your concerns weren't taken seriously?
Their whole, when they informed us of the findings, it was all excuses like, oh, well, that weekend it was all staff that didn't, we need to stop doing that, having staff on. There needs to be someone more who knows the ward over the weekend, about there being no numbers on the door, and think, oh, that shouldn't be right. Everyone should know where some... So it was all just answers like that, like platitudes, really. That's all they were. Nothing was ever taken, I felt, really seriously.
And turning then to the Trust's investigation into Jeff's death, is it your understanding that that only came about because of your complaint?
Yes. Oh, yeah, there'd been nothing done prior to that.
You state in your witness statement that an investigation report dated the 15th of January 2016 was sent to you alongside a letter dated the 29th of January 2016, providing some further responses to concerns that you had raised. You felt the findings were worse than you even thought.
Oh, yeah.
And at a final meeting, the Trust recognised there were failures, but they responded to you as if they had addressed all of those problems.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes, that was really their answers. Oh, yeah, that was... But it's OK, we've already told people they've got to start doing this and we're going to make sure that happens. Yeah, there was no real ownership of the fact that something was seriously wrong. None whatsoever.
And very briefly, you set out some of the problems that that investigation identified at paragraph 44 of your witness statement. I'll just go through a few of those. Jeff was identified as at risk of falls, but the detailed falls risk assessment wasn't undertaken and falls prevention equipment was not offered or used.
Yeah.
It's unclear how he sustained further bruising to his face, swollen wrist, and fractured nose. The investigators, in fact, questioned whether he had another fall that was unwitnessed and unreported.
Yes.
Would you like to say anything further about that?
I would have doubted it because that fall was on the last month was on the Saturday night. On the Sunday morning, Dad was obviously... there was something seriously wrong. He didn't want to get out of bed, as we found out later, but they dressed him, put him in the hoist, taken him down to the day room, put him in the chair, taken the walker away, and he was still sat in their chair 10 o'clock at night when staff realised nobody had been anywhere near him or done anything with him, and he was totally incoherent by then. Their excuse was he was sleepy, and that was it. So there's no way he had another fall because he hadn't been able to even move from that chair.
You state in your witness statement that following the investigation, an action plan was drawn up, but your view is that it was without substance or urgency, and you didn't think that it represented a proper attempt to address the serious findings of the investigation. Is that
No.
right?
Part of one of my previous jobs was doing audits and action plans, and this couldn't even be classed as an action plan. There was nothing that was it was all just wishy-washy, nothing that it wasn't even worth the paper it was printed on, really. And they were then supposed to update me as each thing was completed, but I never heard anything else from them. And I think it got to the point where there's only so long you can fight, and it was just all-consuming, and the anger, and and I think it makes you wonder when you know they're not taking any of it seriously. I mean, God, I don't get how they can't take something like that seriously, but yeah.
Thank you. When you say they were supposed to update you, you refer in your witness statement to promises that they made to you. Is that in relation to that they were supposed to say what actions
plan.
Were taken on what dates,
Yes,
and to
they
confirm
were.
that everything had been done, essentially?
No.
And finally, there wasn't an inquest into Jeff's death. Is that right?
That's right. I mean, initially when we put in the complaint, it had actually been given to the ward manager of that ward to carry out the investigation. It was only the fact that someone higher up must have thought, oh, that's not good because of what had gone on. So they then appointed someone higher up to go and do the investigation.
Yes. Who was more independent?
Yes, yeah. They were still part of it, but yes, they were, yeah. So it just shows at the beginning, it wasn't even taken seriously just to ask the ward manager to address such, what had happened, such horrific things, really, that you can do that to someone in 6 days. For someone to walk in there under their own steam on the Tuesday and then have to be taken out of there in an ambulance and never able to have a talk or anything with anyone ever again, because by the Thursday he was gone. Well, he was gone really anyway. He was just waiting for the rest of his body to catch up.
Thank you, Linda. Finally, I'd like to ask you some questions about your recommendations for change. It may be that you feel you've covered everything that you'd like to in respect of them, but I'd like to give you an opportunity just to comment further if there's anything you'd like to add.
I mean...
sorry, I'll pop them on the screen, Linda,
yeah,
and we can go through. Amanda, please could we put up paragraph 50A on page 14? Linda, please do go ahead if there was something that came to
I think having read other people's witness statements and everything, even from my own, there just seems to be a common theme of the staff, they weren't really the staff that should have been on there, or it was all about no one knew what they was really doing. And this seems to be the excuse across the board, like, we had shortage in staff, or they was all on holiday, so we got all these people in to come and do it instead, and they obviously didn't read notes or whatever. That isn't good enough when you're putting someone's life in their hands and they're taking that person who they are supposed to look after. Yeah. And I think there's a lot of other things, sort of like the technical things of the assessments that should be carried out and everything else. But I think most of it comes down to the fact you haven't got the staff in the first place that want to do or are competent enough to do those type of things. Because without those systems in place, you can't do anything. And the fact that they are more than happy for this to keep going on like it has done. I mean, I was unaware initially about the inquiry, but when I saw, because I think everyone you always think, oh, it's only you, it's only happened to you, they was unlucky. But then when you see how much has gone on and the fact that they don't keep a lot of records and everything, so they are more than aware what's happening, but I don't know, it's like they don't want to really do anything because they have more successes and they have not. But that's not the point. Everyone should, they're taken into their care. Families should be assured that their loved one is going to get the attention and help that they need. Otherwise, why take them in there? Dad didn't necessarily have to go in, I don't think, because, yeah, he had vascular dementia, so the chance of him actually ever being able to do anything to himself was slim to none. So that was just, I think, as well, an easy out for them. But when he was in there, they should at least be monitoring him and talking to us about what they thought we could do with him, because that wasn't really an environment we now know he should have been for. It was just totally detrimental to him. I mean, when my mum went back on the Wednesday, he had packed all his bags, had his coat on, and he begged Mum to take him home because he just said, I'm so unhappy and they're not looking after me. So now, of course, my mum has that to live with as well. But yeah.
Linda, you've just covered your first two recommendations, and in fact, I think you've touched upon the third, and that's, Amanda, we're at paragraph C now, if we could just turn to that. You say it often seems problems are blamed on a lack of money, and you refer to staff shortage. So is that what you're referring to there?
Yeah, that is. It's all part and parcel of it. It's cheaper to get like an auxiliary. I mean, I'm not putting down auxiliaries or anyone, but you need people who are aware of those people's cases, because they have such complex needs that they need people who know them and can help, are there to actually help or assist in any way, and not to even talk to the family about it. So if it, because again, I keep saying, because it was such a short time, I think we all know you go into hospital, it'll be a while before anything really happens because you've got the weekend, you've got this happening. And I suppose we thought that as well, because he'd gone in and he'd seen this and that and the doctor wasn't available. But no, too late.
Thank you, Linda. Linda, that concludes my questions for the moment. Chair, do you have any questions?
I have no further questions.
No. We're going to take a 10-minute break to see if there are any further questions for you, Linda. If there are no further questions, then we can let you go, and that will conclude your evidence.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much for coming to give us evidence. You've done it very clearly. We've heard you loud and clear.
Thank you.
You've made made us aware of all sorts of things that I'm very pleased to have heard about, so thank you.
That's okay, thank you for listening.
Linda, before you leave the witness box, I'd like to display your photograph for a few moments, please. Amanda, can we have the photograph on screen? Thank you.
He was so proud then.
Yes, look at him. Is that your wedding?
That was my dad, yeah. My wedding is my
Yes,
second wedding,
yes,
but
yes,
yeah.
Lovely.
See by his smile.
Yes.
He loved his girls.
Look at his lovely tie.
But yeah.
Thank you.
Thank
Amanda,
you.
please could you take down the photograph?
Thank you.
Chair, if there are no questions, we will resume at 10 a.m. on Monday morning, at the final day of this hearing, where we will hear from 3 witnesses, Jane Mayer, Emma Cracknell and Catherine Peck, followed by a closing statement from counsel to the inquiry, Nicholas Griffin, King's Counsel.
Thank you. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.